A desperate billionaire becomes stranded in the city's most dangerous neighborhood during a violent storm. When a homeless woman risks everything to protect him from local gangs, he discovers her shocking past and the child she lost to a corrupt system. Now, as threats close in from all sides, they must confront powerful enemies, while an unexpected bond forms that will transform both their lives forever. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But before we continue, make sure to subscribe to follow more incredible stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from today. The rain fell in unforgiving sheets across downtown Westbrook, turning the already dangerous streets of the Hollows district into glistening rivers of darkness. Alexander Reid, billionaire tech mogul and CEO of Quantum Innovations, cursed under his breath as his custom Bentley sputtered to a halt. "What's happening, Marcus?" Alexander demanded, leaning forward from the back seat. His driver frantically worked the ignition. "I'm sorry, sir. The engine's dead. Something's wrong with the electrical system." Alexander checked his watch, 11:42 p.m. The charity gala had run later than expected, and he'd insisted on taking the shortcut through the Hollows despite Marcus's objections. Now they were stranded in the most notorious neighborhood in Westbrook, known for its gang violence and crime rate. "Call roadside assistance," Alexander ordered, his voice tight with irritation. Marcus held up his phone helplessly. "No signal, sir. The storm must be interfering with the towers." Lightning cracked across the sky, illuminating the abandoned buildings and graffiti-covered walls surrounding them. Alexander loosened his bow tie, feeling a trickle of uncharacteristic fear. At 42, he had built an empire from nothing, survived hostile takeovers and corporate espionage, but he'd never felt as exposed as he did now. "We need to find help," Alexander said, reaching for the door handle. "Sir, I wouldn't recommend," Marcus began. "Stay with the car," Alexander cut him off. "Lock the doors. I'll find a store or gas station with a phone." Before Marcus could protest further, Alexander stepped out into the downpour, his $1,000 shoes immediately submerged in an ankle-deep puddle. His tailored tuxedo offered little protection against the biting cold rain as he hunched his shoulders and began walking toward a faint light in the distance. He'd barely made it half a block when he sensed movement behind him. Turning quickly, Alexander found himself facing three men, their faces partially hidden beneath hoods. "Well, well," the tallest one said, stepping forward. "Looks like we got ourselves a lost tourist." Alexander squared his shoulders, adopting the commanding presence that had intimidated countless boardrooms. "I'm not looking for trouble. My car broke down." The men exchanged amused glances. "That's a real shame," said the one with a scar running down his cheek. "Dangerous place to break down. Dangerous place to be wearing such a nice watch, too." Alexander instinctively covered his platinum Patek Philippe with his hand. "I have cash. Take it and leave me alone." He reached for his wallet. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," came a woman's voice from the shadows. All four men turned to see a figure emerge from an alley. She was thin, dressed in layers of worn clothing, her face weathered but her eyes sharp and alert. Despite her disheveled appearance, she carried herself with unmistakable confidence. "This ain't your business, Serena," the tall man growled. "I'm making it my business, Dion," she replied evenly. "Victor won't be happy if you cause trouble on this block. You know the rules." The tension in the air was palpable as Dion and Serena locked eyes in a silent battle of wills. Finally, Dion spat on the ground. "Whatever. Rich boy ain't worth the hassle." He jabbed a finger at Alexander. "You got lucky tonight." The three men melted back into the darkness, leaving Alexander alone with the woman called Serena. Now that the immediate danger had passed, he noticed her more clearly. She was perhaps in her late 30s, with dark hair streaked with premature gray pulled back in a practical knot. Despite her obvious poverty, there was a dignity about her that commanded respect. "Thank you," Alexander said, somewhat stiffly. Serena assessed him with a calculating gaze. You won't last another 10 minutes out here dressed like that. Come on." Without waiting for his response, she turned and walked back toward the alley. Alexander hesitated, torn between following a homeless stranger into a dark alley and remaining alone on the street where Dion and his friends might return. "I need to get back to my driver," he called after her. Serena stopped and looked back. "Where's your car?" Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. 2 blocks that way," Alexander pointed. She shook her head. "If it's where I think it is, it's already being stripped for parts. Your driver, too, if he's smart, will have run for safer ground. Now, are you coming or not? I don't make offers twice." The certainty in her voice left Alexander no choice. He followed her through a maze of narrow passages between buildings, eventually arriving at what appeared to be an abandoned warehouse. Serena approached a nondescript door, reinforced with multiple locks, and knocked in a specific pattern. After a moment, a small viewport slid open, revealing a pair of suspicious eyes. "It's me," Serena said simply. The door swung open to reveal a surprisingly warm and well-organized space. What had once been an industrial warehouse had been converted into a makeshift community shelter. Dozens of people, men, women, and a few children, occupied various corners of the vast room. Some slept on cots, others huddled around portable heaters, and in the center, a communal kitchen area served as the heart of the operation. "Welcome to the Haven," Serena said, noting Alexander's stunned expression. "It's not the Ritz, but it's dry and relatively safe." An elderly man approached them, his face breaking into a smile at the sight of Serena. "You're drenched! And who's your friend?" "This is—" Serena paused, realizing she hadn't asked his name. "Alexander," he supplied, deliberately omitting his last name. "He's lost," Serena explained. "Car broke down, and he ran into Dion's crew. Figured he could wait out the storm here." The old man extended a hand. "I'm George, unofficial manager of this establishment. Any friend of Serena's is welcome here." Alexander shook the offered hand, noting the strength in the old man's grip despite his age. "Thank you for your hospitality." George chuckled. "Hospitality's free. Everything else costs something." At Alexander's alarmed look, he added, "Not money. We operate on a different currency here. Everyone contributes what they can. Skills, time, resources." "I'm afraid I don't have much to offer at the moment," Alexander said, gesturing to his soaked tuxedo. "You can help me with the leak in the east corner," Serena suggested. "It's getting worse with this storm." Before Alexander could protest, she was leading him across the warehouse, past curious onlookers who stared openly at his formal attire. They reached a section where water was steadily dripping through the ceiling, collected in a series of increasingly full buckets. "Hold this," Serena instructed, handing him a ladder. She climbed up with practiced ease, carrying a tarp and some tools. Alexander watched as she worked efficiently, sealing the leak with a temporary patch. It struck him how capable she was, how resourceful. In his world, problems were solved by throwing money at them or delegating to others. Here, survival depended on direct action and practical skills. "Hand me that roll of duct tape," Serena called down. As Alexander passed it up, their fingers brushed briefly. He was surprised by how warm her hands were despite the cold. "So, Alexander with no last name," Serena said as she continued working, "what brought you to the Hollows at this hour, business or pleasure?" "Neither," he replied. "A shortcut gone wrong. I was heading home from a charity event." Serena snorted. "A charity event? Let me guess. Cocktails and canapes while discussing how to help the unfortunate from a safe distance?" Alexander bristled at her tone. "The Westbrook Children's Hospital raised over $2 million tonight." "Congratulations," Serena said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "I'm sure that will comfort the kids sleeping under the Jefferson Street Bridge tonight." "That's not fair," Alexander protested. "Those funds will provide medical care for thousands of children who wouldn't otherwise have access." Serena descended the ladder, facing him directly. "And what about the children who need more than medical care? What about the ones who need homes, safety, second chances?" There was something in the intensity of her gaze that made Alexander look away first. She wasn't just speaking in generalities. There was personal pain behind her words. "You don't know anything about me," he said quietly. "I know your type," Serena replied. "Men in expensive suits who think charity is something you do once a year at galas, who never have to see the real consequences of a broken system." Before Alexander could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A young woman had burst in, soaking wet and frantic. "Serena," she called. "They're doing a sweep. Police and social services are clearing out the tunnels and heading this way." The news sent a ripple of panic through the haven. People began gathering their meager possessions, faces tight with fear. "How much time do we have?" George asked, already moving toward a hidden panel in the wall. 20 minutes, maybe less," the young woman replied. Serena took immediate charge. "Everyone stay calm. Protocol 3. Essentials only. Leave anything that can be replaced. Families with children go first, then elderly." Alexander watched in amazement as the chaotic scramble transformed into an organized evacuation. Serena moved through the group, giving specific instructions, calming fears, ensuring no one was left behind. "What's happening?" Alexander asked George, who was helping a woman with a sleeping child. "City sweeps," the old man explained grimly. "They come through periodically to clean up the area. What they really mean is arresting anyone without proper shelter, confiscating belongings, and separating families if they find children." "They can't do that," Alexander said, shocked. George gave him a pitying look. "They do it all the time, son. The system doesn't see people. It sees problems to be removed from public view." Serena approached them, her face set with determination. "George, take everyone through the south tunnel. It connects to the old subway maintenance shaft and comes out near River District." "What about you?" George asked. "I'll stay behind to cover the evidence. Make it look like no one's been here." "That's too risky," George protested. "If they catch you—" "They won't," Serena said with finality. "Now go." As George hurried away to lead the evacuation, Serena turned to Alexander. "You should go with them. Your fancy clothes will attract too much attention if the police find you here." Alexander looked around at the community, rapidly disappearing through hidden exits. "Let me help," he said suddenly. "Two people can work faster than one." Serena studied him for a moment, then nodded. "Start taking down those portable heaters and storing them in that panel over there. Wipe down anything with fingerprints." They worked in silence for several minutes, efficiently removing evidence of human habitation. Alexander found himself impressed by the ingenuity of the haven's design. Hidden storage compartments, removable living spaces, escape routes disguised as ordinary walls. "You've done this before," he observed. "Too many times," Serena replied, not pausing in her work. "We've lost 3 shelters in the past year. Each time we rebuild, each time they find us." "Why not find a legitimate space, somewhere with proper permits?" Serena laughed bitterly. "With what money? And even if we had it, no one rents to people like us. No credit history, no references, no steady income. The system is designed to keep us invisible." Outside, the wail of sirens grew closer. Serena tensed, listening intently. "They're coming from the north side. We need to move now." She led Alexander to a section of wall that appeared solid but slid open at her touch, revealing a narrow passage. "This leads to the maintenance tunnels. We can—" The crash of the main entrance being forced open cut her off. Flashlight beams swept across the warehouse floor as officers entered the building. "In here now," Serena whispered urgently, pushing Alexander toward the hidden passage. But instead of following him, she closed the panel, leaving herself exposed in the main area. Alexander watched through a small crack as she deliberately knocked over a stack of crates, drawing the officer's attention. "Hands where we can see them!" an officer shouted. Serena raised her hand slowly. "This is private property," she said calmly. "I have permission to be here." "ID!" demanded another officer, approaching her cautiously. "In my back pocket," Serena replied. As she was being questioned, Alexander realized her strategy. She was creating a distraction, allowing the others more time to escape through the south tunnel. She had sacrificed her own freedom to protect her community. Without thinking, Alexander pushed the panel open and stepped back into the warehouse. "There you are," he called out loudly, straightening his bow tie and adopting his most authoritative tone. "I've been looking everywhere for you." The officers swung their flashlights toward him, momentarily confused by the appearance of a man in a tuxedo. "Sir, this is a police operation. I need you to step back," the lead officer said. Alexander ignored him, walking directly to Serena. "I apologize for the confusion, officers. I'm Alexander Reid, CEO of Quantum Innovations. This woman works for my foundation. We're surveying this building as a potential location for our homeless outreach program." Serena's eyes widened slightly, but she quickly composed her features. "Reid? The tech billionaire?" The officer lowered his flashlight slightly. "The same," Alexander confirmed smoothly. "My car broke down nearby, and Miss Peterson was kind enough to show me the property while we wait for assistance." He pulled out his wallet, extracting a business card. "Feel free to verify my identity." The officers exchanged uncertain glances. Alexander could see the calculations happening behind their eyes, the risk of hassling a billionaire versus the routine sweep of homeless individuals. "We received reports of illegal occupation," the officer said, less confidently now. "As you can see," Alexander gestured around the now empty warehouse, "we're simply conducting a property assessment. Any previous occupants have long since moved on." After a tense moment, the lead officer nodded curtly. "Very well, Mr. Reid, but I suggest you find a safer neighborhood for your charitable efforts. This area isn't appropriate for business operations." "I appreciate your concern, officer. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have work to continue." The officers retreated, clearly reluctant but unwilling to challenge someone of Alexander's stature without stronger evidence. When the last police car had driven away, Serena turned to him with a mixture of amazement and suspicion. "Alexander Reid? The Alexander Reid?" He shrugged uncomfortably. "I didn't think my last name was relevant before." "A billionaire tech CEO," Serena said slowly. "And you just lied to the police to protect a homeless shelter." "You were protecting everyone else," Alexander pointed out. "It seemed only fair." Serena's gaze was penetrating. "Why would someone like you risk legal trouble for people like us?" Before Alexander could answer, his phone buzzed. The storm had passed enough for cellular service to return. "My driver," he explained, checking the message. "He's safe. Made it to a gas station on the edge of the district." Serena nodded, the momentary connection between them already fading. "Then I guess your adventure in the slums is over. Your real life awaits." Alexander found himself strangely reluctant to leave. "What about you? Where will you go?" "I need to make sure everyone made it to the safety point," she said, already moving toward the south tunnel. "We have contingency plans." "Let me help," Alexander offered, surprising himself. "I have resources, connections." "We don't need your charity, Mr. Reid," Serena cut him off, her voice cooling. "We've survived this long without billionaire saviors." "That's not what I meant," Alexander said, frustrated by her sudden wall of resistance. "I just what? Want to feel good about yourself? Add another line to your philanthropic resume? We're not a project, Mr. Reid. We're people." The harshness of her words struck him like a physical blow. In his world, money solved problems. It opened doors, removed obstacles, created opportunities. The idea that his wealth could be viewed as an impediment rather than an advantage was foreign to him. "I understand," he said finally, though he wasn't sure he did. "Thank you for your help tonight. I won't forget it." Serena's expression softened slightly. "Get back to your world, Alexander Reid. This isn't a place for men like you." With that, she disappeared into the tunnel, leaving Alexander alone in the empty warehouse. Outside, the storm had subsided to a gentle rain. He made his way back to the street, using his phone's GPS to navigate toward the gas station where Marcus waited. As he walked through the now quiet streets of the Hollows, Alexander couldn't shake the image of Serena standing defiant before the police, risking everything to protect her community. In his 42 years, surrounded by wealth and power, he'd rarely witnessed such raw courage. His phone buzzed again. His assistant, frantic about his whereabouts, reminding him of tomorrow's board meeting, the pending acquisition deal, the investors waiting for his decision. His real life, as Serena had put it, pulling him back. Yet something had shifted inside him. The woman's accusation echoed in his mind. Men in expensive suits who think charity is something you do once a year at galas. By the time Alexander reached the gas station and saw the relief on Marcus's face, he had made a decision. Tomorrow would proceed as planned. The meetings, the calls, the decisions that affected thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. But afterward, he would return to the Hollows. Not as a billionaire savior, but as a man seeking answers. Because in those few hours in the Haven, Alexander Reid had glimpsed something his money couldn't buy. A community bound by necessity, but sustained by genuine connection. And in Serena's fierce protectiveness, he'd recognized a quality he'd been unable to name, but had been searching for his entire life. As the replacement car arrived and Alexander settled into its leather interior, he knew with certainty that his unexpected night in the city's most dangerous neighborhood had changed him. What he didn't know was that his encounter with Serena was just the beginning of a story that would upend both their worlds in ways neither could imagine. Alexander couldn't focus on the quarterly projections displayed on the boardroom's massive screen. 2 weeks had passed since that rainy night in the Hollows, yet his mind kept returning to the abandoned warehouse and the woman who had saved him from both the streets and the police. "Alex, your thoughts on the Meridian acquisition?" He blinked, finding 12 expectant faces turned toward him. Patricia Chen, his CFO, had paused her presentation, clearly waiting for his input. He began, then straightened in his chair. "The numbers look promising, but I'm concerned about the workforce integration. How many layoffs are we projecting?" Patricia exchanged glances with the head of operations. Around 300 positions would be redundant, standard procedure for an acquisition of this size. 300 jobs, 300 lives disrupted. Before his night in the Hollows, Alexander would have nodded and moved on, accepting it as the cost of business efficiency. Now he heard Serena's voice in his head. Men in expensive suits who never have to see the real consequences. "I want alternatives," he said firmly. "Retraining programs, repositioning within our other divisions. I want a plan that minimizes job losses to under 50. A stunned silence fell over the boardroom. Patricia recovered first. "That would add significant costs to the acquisition, Alex. The shareholders will understand that sustainable growth includes community responsibility," he finished. "Draft the new proposal by Friday." As the meeting adjourned, Alexander's assistant approached with his usual stack of messages and reminders. "Sir, you asked me to look into something?" Alexander took the folder labeled Hollows District Development. Inside was a comprehensive report on the neighborhood's history, current statistics, and, most importantly, a list of property owners. "The warehouse at 1420 Blackwell Street is owned by Westbrook Development Corporation," his assistant explained. "They've held it for 9 years, with no improvements or usage. It's part of a larger portfolio they're sitting on until property values rise enough for profitable redevelopment." Alexander recognized the strategy. Buy cheap property in distressed neighborhoods. Leave it vacant until gentrification pushed values up, then sell or develop for maximum profit. It was a common practice among real estate investors. "Who owns Westbrook Development?" he asked. His assistant hesitated. "It's a subsidiary of Camden Holdings, which is ultimately owned by Ericsson Enterprises." Alexander's jaw tightened. Victor Ericsson, his longtime business rival. The same Victor whose name Serena had invoked to ward off the street thugs. The connection couldn't be coincidental. "Get me everything on Ericsson's holdings in the Hollows, and clear my afternoon." 2 hours later, Alexander parked his most inconspicuous car, a modest Audi rather than one of his luxury vehicles, several blocks from the warehouse. He dressed down in jeans and a simple button-down shirt, hoping to attract less attention than last time. The warehouse stood empty, no sign of the Haven's community. Alexander circled the building twice before noticing a small figure watching him from an alley across the street. He approached carefully, recognizing George, the elderly man from the shelter. "Mr. Reid," George acknowledged with a slight nod. "Didn't expect to see you again." "I'm looking for Serena. Alexander admitted. George steadied him, roomy eyes surprisingly sharp. Why? I want to help. She said you might come back, George said finally. Rich folks often do after they get a taste of feeling like saviors. The guilt or the thrill brings them back. Alexander bristled. That's not. Save it, George interrupted. I've lived long enough to know everyone's got their reasons. Question is whether those reasons help us or just help you sleep better at night. The old man's directness was refreshing after weeks of corporate doublespeak. Fair enough, Alexander conceded. Where is she? George pointed toward an abandoned subway station 3 blocks south. Community Outreach Day. But, word of advice? She won't welcome your charity any more today than she did 2 weeks ago. The defunct Clayton Street station had once been a bustling transit hub before budget cuts had closed it a decade ago. Now, its entrance was partially boarded up, though Alexander could see signs of regular use in the worn paths through the debris. Inside, the cavernous main hall had been transformed. Folding tables lined the walls, staffed by volunteers serving food, distributing clothing and providing basic medical care to a steady stream of people, the invisible population of Westbrook that Alexander's world rarely acknowledged. He spotted Serena at the far end, bandaging an elderly woman's foot with practiced efficiency. She wore the same practical layers as before, her dark hair pulled back, utterly focused on her task. Alexander hung back, watching as she finished the bandaging, helped the woman put her shoe back on, and pressed something into her hand. Medication, perhaps, or money. It was only after the woman hobbled away that Serena looked up and saw him. Her expression cycled rapidly through surprise, wariness, and finally, resignation. She gestured for another volunteer to take her place and approached Alexander. You came back, she said. Not quite a question. I said I would help. No, you offered help. I declined. Serena crossed her arms. Yet here you are. The warehouse is owned by Victor Erickson, Alexander said, watching her reaction carefully. Something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, certainly, but also something deeper. Fear? Anger? I know who owns it, she replied evenly. You mentioned his name that night with the street thugs. You know him. Serena glanced around the station, then gestured for Alexander to follow her to a quieter corner. Everyone in the Hollows knows Victor Erickson. He owns half the abandoned buildings in the district. That's not what I meant, Alexander pressed. You invoked his name like it carried weight, like those men would fear him. For a long moment, Serena seemed to be calculating something, weighing risk against potential benefit. Finally, she sighed. Victor controls more than real estate here. He controls the streets. Nothing happens in the Hollows without his knowledge or permission. He's involved in criminal activity? Alexander asked, though he'd already suspected as much from his research. The line between legitimate business and crime gets blurry in neighborhoods like this, Serena said. Victor started here, grew up in these streets before building his empire. He hasn't forgotten his roots, for better or worse. And what's your connection to him? Serena's eyes hardened. What makes you think there is one? The way you said his name. The fact that you're running a shelter in his building without being evicted. The respect those men showed when you mentioned him. You ask a lot of questions for someone who hasn't earned any answers, Serena said coldly. Why are you really here, Alexander Reid? Slumming for thrills, looking for a pet project to ease your conscience. Alexander matched her directness. I want to understand why a woman with your obvious intelligence and leadership abilities is living on the streets instead of running a legitimate nonprofit or business. Not everyone gets the luxury of choosing their path, billionaire, Serena snapped. Some of us are too busy surviving to worry about career advancement. That's not an answer. It's the only one you're getting today. She turned to leave, then paused. If you really want to help, we need antibiotics, pain relievers, and clean bandages. Not your presence or your questions. Before Alexander could respond, a commotion erupted near the station entrance. A young man burst in, blood streaming from a cut above his eye. They're coming, he shouted. Police raid at the tunnels. They've got social services with them. The orderly distribution center transformed instantly into organized chaos. Volunteers quickly packed supplies while those receiving services scattered toward various exits. Alexander recognized the same efficient evacuation protocol he'd witnessed at the warehouse. Third raid this month, Serena muttered, already moving to help. They're getting more aggressive. Why the tunnels? Alexander asked, following her. Families with children stay there. It's warmer, more protected from the elements. Serena's voice caught slightly. They're targeting families now, separating children from parents under the guise of child welfare concerns. The raw pain in her voice stopped Alexander short. You've lost someone, he realized aloud. Serena froze, then slowly turned to face him. The carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing a glimpse of devastating grief before she masked it again. Help or leave, she said tersely. I don't have time for your amateur psychology. Alexander chose to help. For the next hour, he carried boxes, loaded supplies into hidden storage areas, and followed Serena's terse instructions without question. By the time the police arrived at the station, most evidence of the outreach program had disappeared, and those it served had vanished into the labyrinthine tunnel system beneath the city. Serena and a core group of volunteers remained, ostensibly cleaning the station as part of a, quote, community beautification project, a cover story that the officers accepted with obvious skepticism but insufficient evidence to disprove. After the police departed, Serena approached Alexander, who was sweeping debris near a defunct ticket booth. You didn't have to stay, she said, her tone slightly less hostile than before. Seemed like the right thing to do. She studied him as if seeing him properly for the first time. You're an odd billionaire, Alexander Reid. Alex, he corrected. My friends call me Alex. We're not friends, she reminded him, but without her earlier edge. A young woman approached them, carrying a sleeping child of about 4. Serena, we can't find Lisa and her boys. They weren't at any of the checkpoints. Concern immediately etched itself across Serena's features. When was she last seen? This morning, heading to the North Tunnel Junction. She was planning to come to the distribution. Serena closed her eyes briefly, composing herself. Check with Marcus at the River District Safe House. I'll look at the junction. She turned to Alexander. You should go now. You've done your good deed for the month. Let me drive you, he offered. It'll be faster than walking, and less conspicuous than public transportation if the police are still patrolling. Serena weighed his offer against her urgency to find the missing family. Fine, she conceded, but just to the North District. In the car, Serena directed him through a maze of side streets, her gaze constantly scanning for police vehicles or social service vans. The silence between them was tense, but not entirely uncomfortable. The child you lost, Alexander said finally, eyes on the road. That's why you do this, isn't it? He expected anger at his presumption, but instead, Serena simply looked out the window, watching the deteriorating buildings pass by. My daughter, Lily. She was 4 when they took her. Alexander waited, sensing there was more she needed to say. I wasn't always homeless, Serena continued, her voice distant. I had a job, an apartment, a life. Then the company downsized, the economy tanked, and suddenly I was behind on rent. One eviction led to another, and within 6 months we were sleeping in my car. She traced a pattern on the window with her finger. Social services claimed I couldn't provide adequate housing. They said it was temporary, just until I got back on my feet. But once you're in the system, everything becomes evidence against you. Missed appointment, negligent parent. Can't afford new clothes, inadequate provider. Eventually, they stopped returning my calls. What happened to Lily? Alexander asked gently. Adopted by a wealthy family in the suburbs, Serena said, her voice cracking slightly. Legally, permanently, irrevocably. I fought for 3 years in court, until my pro bono lawyer finally told me it was over. She was gone. The raw pain in her voice resonated in the car's confines. Alexander thought of his own privileged childhood, the safety and security he'd taken for granted. When was this? He asked. 6 years ago. She'd be 10 now. Serena straightened, visibly composing herself. Turn here. The tunnel entrance is behind that condemned building. Alexander parked, But before Serena could exit, he gently touched her arm. "Why tell me this? You don't trust me. You've made that clear." Serena met his gaze directly. "Because you keep coming back. And because maybe, just maybe, someone in your position should understand what the system really does to people like us." She got out of the car, and after a moment's hesitation, Alexander followed. The tunnel entrance was concealed behind a rusted metal door that looked permanently sealed to casual observers but opened smoothly when Serena manipulated a hidden mechanism. Inside, the tunnel stretched into darkness, illuminated sporadically by battery-powered lanterns. The walls were lined with makeshift living spaces, mattresses, tarps creating private areas, crates repurposed as furniture. Most were empty now, their occupants scattered by the police raid. "Lisa?" Serena called, her voice echoing slightly. "It's Serena. Are you here?" A faint sound came from deeper in the tunnel. They followed it to find a woman huddled in a corner, clutching two small boys to her chest. Her face was bruised, her lips split and swollen. "They found us," she whispered when she saw Serena. "They took my ID, our food stamps, everything. I ran before they could take the boys." Serena knelt beside her, gently examining her injuries. "Did they follow you here?" Lisa shook her head. "I don't think so. We hid in the drainage pipe for hours before coming back." "You're safe now," Serena assured her, helping her to her feet. "We'll get you to the river district. They have a doctor there." Alexander hung back, witnessing the genuine care and competence with which Serena handled the crisis. As they helped Lisa and her children toward the tunnel exit, he realized he was seeing a side of humanity his wealth had insulated him from, both the cruelty of a system that treated poverty as a crime, and the extraordinary resilience of those fighting to survive within it. Outside, Lisa balked at the sight of Alexander's car. "Who is he?" she asked Serena fearfully. "He's—" Serena hesitated. "He's helping today. We can trust him." The simple statement felt more significant than it should have. Alexander drove them carefully through the back streets to a seemingly abandoned apartment building in the river district. Inside, he discovered another hidden community, smaller than the Haven but just as organized, with a volunteer doctor already treating those injured during the raid. As the doctor examined Lisa, Serena pulled Alexander aside. "Thank you," she said simply. "You should go now. Your world will be wondering where you disappeared to." "What about you?" Alexander asked. "I'll stay here tonight. We need to reorganize, find new safe spaces." She hesitated. "The warehouse won't be safe anymore. They'll be watching it." Alexander made a decision. "I have a property," he said. "A commercial building in Riverside. It's been vacant since my company moved to our new headquarters. It has utilities, security systems, private access." Serena's expression immediately closed. "I told you, we don't want your charity." "It's not charity," Alexander insisted. "It's resource sharing. You have the knowledge and skills to help these people. I have empty space that's sitting unused." "And what do you get out of it?" Serena challenged. Alexander considered his answer carefully. "The satisfaction of doing something meaningful, instead of just writing checks at galas," he said finally. "And maybe the chance to understand what you're fighting for." Serena studied him, weighing his sincerity. "I'll need to discuss it with the others," she said eventually. "This isn't my decision alone." "Of course." Alexander pulled out a business card and wrote an address on the back. "This is my private number. Call me when you decide." As he turned to leave, Serena spoke again. "Why are you really doing this, Alex? The truth this time." He paused, considering how much to reveal. "Because that night in the warehouse was the first time in years I felt like I was seeing the world as it really is, not the sanitized version money creates. And because—" he hesitated, then finished honestly, "because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you and what you've built here." Serena's expression softened slightly. "Go back to your world, billionaire. If we need your building, I'll call." 3 days later, Alexander sat in his penthouse office, reviewing the final details of the Meridian acquisition. His executive team had been baffled by his insistence on the reduced layoff plan, but they'd eventually produced a workable strategy that would retrain and reassign most of the affected employees. His private phone, the one whose number he'd given to Serena, buzzed on his desk. The message was brief. We'll see the building. Tomorrow, 9 a.m. Alexander felt an unexpected surge of anticipation. He texted back a simple confirmation, then returned to his work with renewed focus. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he felt a sense of purpose beyond quarterly profits and market share. What he didn't know was that across town, Victor Erickson was sitting in his own office, reviewing surveillance photos of Alexander Reid's car in the Hollows. Beside the photos lay a detailed file on Serena, including her full name, Serena Walker, and a comprehensive history of her battle with the child welfare system. "So Reid's taking an interest in our neighborhood project," Erickson mused to his security chief. "And in our old friend Serena, how interesting." "Want us to warn him off?" the man asked. Erickson considered the question, then smiled coldly. "No, let's see where this goes. It might provide leverage we can use in our upcoming negotiations." He tapped the file thoughtfully. "Besides, Serena and I have unfinished business. Perhaps Mr. Reid can help settle that account." The pieces were moving on a chessboard Alexander didn't even know he was playing on. As night fell over Westbrook, 3 lives were being drawn together by forces none fully understood. A billionaire seeking meaning, a homeless advocate fighting for her community, and a shadowy power broker with secrets that connected them all. And somewhere in the suburbs, a 10-year-old girl named Lily lived in blissful ignorance of the storm gathering around her lost identity, and the mother who had never stopped searching for her. Alexander arrived at the Riverside building 30 minutes early, taking a final walk through the space before Serena and her team arrived. The former regional headquarters of Quantum Innovations sprawled across 3 floors, with office spaces, conference rooms, a cafeteria, and shower facilities. He'd spent the previous day arranging for fresh linens, basic toiletries, and a fully stocked kitchen, necessities that wouldn't feel like charity. At precisely 9, Serena arrived with George and 3 others Alexander hadn't met before. Their expressions ranged from suspicious to cautiously hopeful as they followed him through the building. "The security system is top tier," Alexander explained, showing them the control panel, "but it's isolated from external networks. No connection to police or private security firms unless you activate that feature." Serena ran her hand along a wall, her practical assessment evident in her gaze. "Utilities? Fully functional. Water, electricity, heating, all working and paid through the next year. The building's listed as being prepared for potential new tenants, so no one will question the usage." George examined the kitchen with obvious approval. "You could feed 100 people here." "That's the idea," Alexander replied. "There's also a loading dock in the back, with private access. People can come and go without being visible from the street." They continued the tour, the group gradually relaxing as they saw the potential of the space. In the large open area that had once been a bullpen of desks, Serena stopped, clearly envisioning how it could be transformed. "We could set up family sections here," she said, almost to herself. "Room dividers for privacy. The conference rooms could serve as classrooms, medical station." Alexander watched her planning, struck by how quickly she assessed and adapted. In his world of corporate strategy, such skills would have made her an invaluable executive. As the others explored further, Serena turned to him. "Why this building? You must have other properties." "It's structurally sound, centrally located but discreet, and most importantly, not owned directly by me," Alexander explained. "It's held by a subsidiary 3 levels removed from Quantum. Even if someone investigates, the connection to me isn't obvious." Serena raised an eyebrow. "You've thought this through." "I try to be thorough." She studied him with that penetrating gaze that seemed to see beyond his carefully constructed facade. "What exactly do you want from this arrangement, Alex? People like you don't just hand over multi-million-dollar properties without expecting something in return." The question was fair, if blunt. Alexander had been asking himself the same thing since making the offer. "Access," he said finally. "Not to control or interfere, but to understand. I want to see what you build here, how you help people the system has failed. I want to learn from you." "I'm not some poverty tourism guide," Serena said sharply. "That's not what I'm asking for," Alexander countered. "I'm asking to be involved, to contribute more than just an empty building and then walk away feeling good about myself. Their conversation was interrupted by one of Serena's companions, a stern-looking woman in her 50s. "Serena, this place is perfect. We could house at least 60 people immediately, more once we get proper beds." Serena nodded, still watching Alexander. "We need to discuss it as a group." They gathered in what had been the executive conference room, Alexander standing back as Serena's team debated the offer. The concerns were predictable. Strings attached, potential exposure, dependency on a billionaire's whim, but the benefits were undeniable. Safety, stability, resources they desperately needed. Finally, George turned to Alexander. "We have conditions." "I'm listening. First, no publicity. This isn't your charitable tax write-off or corporate social responsibility project." Alexander nodded. "Agreed. Second, we maintain operational control. You don't decide who stays here or how we run things." "Of course." Serena spoke next. "Third, we need a legal agreement. Something that protects our people if you change your mind or sell the building." Alexander appreciated the foresight. "I'll have my personal attorney draft a 5-year lease at no cost, with renewal options. The building will be transferred to a nonprofit foundation with you on the board of directors." The group exchanged surprised glances at his ready acceptance of their terms. "Last condition," Serena said. "You don't just drop by whenever you feel like playing benefactor. This will be people's home, not your pet project to show off to your rich friends." "I wouldn't," Alexander began, then stopped himself. "That's fair. We can establish regular times when I'm welcome to visit and contribute." After further discussion, they reached an agreement. Alexander would provide the building and initial supplies. Serena's organization would handle operations. He would visit weekly to help and learn, but always on their terms. As the others began measuring spaces and planning the layout, Serena pulled Alexander aside. "Thank you," she said simply. "This will make a real difference." "It's just a building," he replied. "No," Serena shook her head. "It's shelter, safety, for people who've had neither for too long." Something in her voice made Alexander ask, "Including you?" Serena's expression shuddered. "I need to help the others plan. We'll be ready to move people in by tomorrow evening." Alexander recognized the deflection but didn't push. "I'll have the paperwork ready by then." As he left the building, Alexander felt an unfamiliar sense of accomplishment, different from closing a business deal or launching a new product. This satisfaction ran deeper, felt more substantial. He was so absorbed in this new feeling that he didn't notice the black SUV parked across the street, or the man inside photographing him as he walked to his car. Within 2 weeks, the Riverside building had transformed into what they now called the Sanctuary. 68 people had moved in, including families with children, elderly individuals, and those with medical needs who had previously been forced to sleep on the streets. True to his word, Alexander visited only at scheduled times, rolling up his sleeves to help with everything from setting up room dividers to serving meals. He had expected resistance from the residents, but found most were simply too focused on rebuilding their lives to worry about the billionaire in their midst. On this particular evening, Alexander sat in what had become the community dining area, helping a 10-year-old boy named Devin with his math homework. The child had been living in the tunnels with his mother for nearly a year after they'd fled domestic violence, but his intelligence and curiosity had remained undimmed by his circumstances. "So X equals 15, Devin concluded, looking up for confirmation. "That's right," Alexander smiled. "You're good at this." "Mom says I get it from my dad," Devin said. Then his face fell. Before he got mean. Alexander wasn't sure how to respond to that, but was saved by Serena's arrival. She'd been coordinating with social service allies to get proper documentation for residents, birth certificates, IDs, and other papers often lost or confiscated during police sweeps. "Devin, your mom's looking for you," she said gently. "Time for dinner." As the boy packed up his schoolwork, he asked Alexander, "Will you be here next week for more math?" "Absolutely," Alexander promised, surprised by how much he was looking forward to it. After Devin left, Serena sat across from Alexander. "You're good with him. He's a bright kid. He should be in a real school." "We're working on it," Serena said. "His mother's afraid of registering him. Her ex has connections in the school district, but but we found an alternative program that might work. Alexander nodded, once again struck by the complex challenges that homelessness presented. Problems that went far beyond simply lacking shelter. "I've been meaning to ask," he said carefully. "Have you ever tried to find your daughter? Officially, I mean, through the courts?" Serena's face tightened. "For 3 years, I fought through every legal channel. But the adoption was sealed, and without money for proper legal representation, I hit dead ends everywhere. Eventually, the lawyer handling my case pro bono said continuing would only cause more pain. What if, Alexander chose his words carefully, what if I could help? I have resources, connections. Don't." Serena's voice was sharp. "Don't offer something you can't deliver." "Not about Lily. I'm not offering false hope," Alexander insisted. "But sealed records aren't always impenetrable, especially with the right legal team." Serena stood abruptly. "This is exactly what I was afraid of. You thinking your money can fix everything. Some things are broken beyond repair, Alex. Even for billionaires." She walked away, leaving Alexander frustrated and confused. He'd only wanted to help, to use his resources for something meaningful. George appeared beside him, having witnessed the exchange. That went about as well as a bull in a china shop. "I don't understand," Alexander admitted. "If there's a chance to find her daughter, why wouldn't she want to try?" George sighed heavily, lowering himself into the chair Serena had vacated. "Hope is dangerous when you've lost everything." Each time she hit a wall trying to find Lily, it was like losing her all over again. Eventually, survival meant putting that hope in a box and focusing on what she could control, helping others avoid the same fate. Alexander considered this. But giving up completely? Who said anything about giving up? George gave him a knowing look. That woman searches every database she can access, checks social media for the adoptive parents' names, scans school photos in the suburbs. She's never stopped looking. She's just stopped believing she'll succeed. The revelation shifted something in Alexander's understanding of Serena. Her gruff exterior, her resistance to his help, they weren't just pride or distrust, but self-protection against more disappointment. "Thank you for telling me this," Alexander said. George stood with a groan, his old joints protesting. "Just be careful with her heart, billionaire. It's more fragile than she lets on." Later that night, alone in his penthouse, Alexander made a decision. He wouldn't tell Serena, wouldn't risk raising her hopes, but he would use every resource at his disposal to find information about Lily. Not to play hero, but because it was within his power to try where others had failed. He opened his laptop and began composing an email to his most trusted private investigator. 2 days later, Alexander was in his office reviewing the preliminary findings his investigator had sent. The trail was cold but not completely dead. The adoption had been handled by a private agency called New Beginnings Family Services, which had since closed. The records had been transferred to the state, but accessing them would require court orders and compelling legal arguments. Alexander was so engrossed in the report that he barely registered his executive assistant's voice on the intercom. "Mr. Reid, there's a Victor Erickson here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he's quite insistent." Alexander froze at the name. Victor Erickson, owner of the warehouse, Serena's mysterious connection, and his longtime business rival. "Send him in," Alexander said after a moment, closing the file on his computer. Victor Erickson strode into the office with the confidence of a man accustomed to power. In his mid-50s, he had the weathered good looks of someone who had risen from nothing and never forgotten it. "Alexander," he said with a thin smile. "It's been, 2 years since we were in the same room? That technology summit in Singapore, wasn't it?" "Victor," Alexander acknowledged, not bothering with pleasantries. "What brings you to quantum?" Erickson settled uninvited into a chair across from Alexander's desk. "Let's not waste time. You've been spending a lot of time in my neighborhood recently." The directness confirmed Alexander's suspicion that he'd been under surveillance. "I wasn't aware you owned the entire Hollows district." "Own, influence, protect. Semantics." Erickson waved dismissively. The point is, you've taken an interest in affairs that don't concern you. Particularly, a certain shelter operation run by Serena Walker. Alexander kept his expression neutral despite the jolt he felt at hearing Serena's full name. I wasn't aware that helping homeless citizens required your permission. Erickson's smile didn't reach his eyes. Helping is one thing. Moving them into a riverside property, setting up what amounts to an unauthorized residence facility, that's quite another. The building is mine to use as I see fit, Alexander replied evenly. And everything is being done legally. We're establishing a proper non-profit foundation as we speak. Very noble, Erickson said with a hint of mockery. But here's what concerns me, Reid. You're disrupting a delicate ecosystem. The Hollows functions according to certain understandings. Arrangements that have kept the peace for years. Arrangements that benefit you, Alexander countered. Erickson leaned forward. Arrangements that benefit everyone involved. The police look the other way on certain activities in exchange for information on major crimes. Businesses get protection. The homeless get designated safe zones where they won't be hassled. It works. And where does Serena fit into these arrangements? Something dangerous flickered in Erickson's eyes. Serena Walker and I have history. Complicated history that predates your sudden interest in playing savior to the downtrodden. Alexander considered his next words carefully. What exactly do you want, Victor? I want you to back off, Erickson said bluntly. Continue funding your little shelter if it makes you feel good, but stay out of Hollow's business. And stay away from Serena Walker. The possessive way Erickson said Serena's name triggered Alexander's protective instincts. That's not going to happen. Erickson studied him for a moment, then chuckled. I see. It's like that, is it? Well, let me offer some friendly advice. Ask Serena about her connection to me. Ask her about April 16th, 6 years ago. Then decide if she's worth what you're risking. He stood to leave, but paused at the door. Oh, and if you're thinking of looking for her daughter, don't bother. That trail was deliberately erased, and for good reason. Some things are better left buried, Alexander. After Erickson left, Alexander sat motionless, processing the implications of the conversation. The threat had been clear, but more troubling was Erickson's knowledge of his interest in finding Lily. Either Alexander's investigation had already triggered monitoring systems, or Erickson had been watching him more closely than he'd realized. And what had happened on April 16th, 6 years ago? That would have been around the time Serena lost Lily to the system. Alexander's private phone buzzed with a text from Serena. Emergency meeting tonight, 8 p.m. Important. The timing couldn't be coincidental. Had Erickson already reached out to her as well? When Alexander arrived at the sanctuary that evening, the atmosphere was tense. Residents spoke in hushed voices, and the usual bustle of activity had been replaced by anxious waiting. George met him at the entrance, his usually calm demeanor visibly strained. What's happening? Alexander asked. Police raid at the Haven's new location, George explained grimly. They arrested 12 people and confiscated everything. Someone tipped them off. In the main conference room, Serena was coordinating with a group of volunteers, her face drawn with exhaustion, but her voice steady. Lisa, take your team to the south tunnel entrance. Anyone who escaped the raid will head there first. Marcus, contact our legal aid partners. We need attorneys at the precinct immediately. She noticed Alexander and beckoned him over. We need to prepare for an influx. Those who weren't arrested will need somewhere to go. How many? Alexander asked. Potentially 30 more people, at least 10 children among them. Alexander nodded. We have the space. What else do you need? For the next several hours, they worked side by side, setting up additional sleeping areas, organizing food distribution, and preparing for traumatized newcomers. Alexander was impressed by Serena's calm efficiency even amid crisis, the way she anticipated needs before they arose. It was nearly midnight when the first group arrived, exhausted families who had narrowly escaped the raid by fleeing through maintenance tunnels. Among them was a pregnant woman who collapsed shortly after arrival, triggering a medical emergency that Serena handled with practiced skill until their volunteer doctor arrived. Only after everyone was settled, fed, and receiving necessary care did Serena finally step away. Alexander found her alone in the small office they'd set up, staring at a map of the city with various locations marked in different colors. You should rest, he said quietly. Can't, she replied without looking up. Need to identify new safe zones, reorganize the network. Alexander moved closer, noticing the slight tremor in her hands. Serena, when did you last sleep? She ignored the question. This wasn't a random raid. Someone targeted us specifically, knew exactly when and where to strike. Victor Erickson came to see me today, Alexander said, watching her reaction carefully. Serena's head snapped up, fear flashing across her face before she controlled it. What did he want? To warn me away from the Hollows. And from you. Alexander paused. He mentioned April 16th, 6 years ago. The color drained from Serena's face. She gripped the edge of the desk, her knuckles white. Get out. Serena. Get out, she repeated, her voice breaking. You went behind my back, didn't you? Started digging into my past, into Lily's case, after I explicitly told you not to. Alexander didn't deny it. I wanted to help. Help? Serena's laugh was bitter. You've just put everyone here in danger. Victor doesn't make idle threats, and he doesn't forgive people who cross him. What hold does he have over you? Alexander pressed. What happened on April 16th? Serena looked at him with such raw pain that he almost regretted asking. The day I lost Lily forever, she whispered. The day Victor Erickson testified in court that I was an unfit mother, that he'd witnessed me endangering my child. His testimony sealed the adoption, made it impossible to appeal. Alexander was stunned. Why would he do that? Serena turned away, her shoulders rigid with tension. Because I refused him. Because I knew too much about his operations. Because he could. And now? Alexander asked. Why is he still involved in your life if he destroyed it? Guilt, control, some twisted sense of responsibility. I don't know anymore. Serena's voice was hollow. He leaves our shelters alone as long as I don't challenge his authority in the Hollows. It's a devil's bargain I made for the sake of the others. Alexander moved toward her, but she backed away. Don't. Whatever you're thinking, whatever grand rescue you're planning, don't. Victor will burn everything to the ground before he lets you win. This isn't about winning, Alexander insisted. It's about doing what's right. Right? Serena's eyes flashed with anger and fear. You have no idea what right means in our world. Your money insulates you from consequences. The rest of us don't have that luxury. Before Alexander could respond, George burst into the room. Serena, we've got trouble. Police just pulled up outside. At least 6 cars. Serena immediately shifted back into crisis mode, her personal pain submerged beneath leadership responsibility. Lockdown protocol. Move the children to the safe room. No one opens the doors without the password. As she rushed out, she threw one last look at Alexander. Not anger now, but something more complex. You should leave through the back. This isn't your fight. But Alexander had already decided it was. The next few hours tested everything Alexander thought he knew about power and influence. His corporate credentials and financial status meant nothing to the police captain demanding to inspect the building for code violations. It took calls to his attorney, a city councilman, and finally the mayor herself to establish that the sanctuary was operating legally as a transitional housing facility under the newly formed Reid Foundation. By dawn, the police had reluctantly departed without making arrests, but the message was clear. Someone powerful wanted the sanctuary shut down. In the aftermath, Alexander found Serena sitting alone on the building's roof, watching the sunrise. He sat beside her without speaking, both of them exhausted beyond words. It was Victor, she said finally. He's sending a message. To you or to me? Both of us. Serena wrapped her arms around herself against the morning chill. I shouldn't have dragged you into this. You didn't, Alexander said quietly. I walked in with my eyes open. They sat in silence for a moment, the city awakening below them. Then Serena spoke, her voice barely audible. I saw her once. Lily, 2 years ago. She was at a playground in Lakeside Heights with her adoptive mother. I just happened to be catering an event nearby. Alexander listened, hearing the pain beneath her controlled tone. She looked happy, Serena continued. Healthy. Loved. I stood there watching her for nearly an hour, memorizing every detail. The way she laughed, how she kept tucking her hair behind her ear, just like I do. Did you speak to her? Serena shook her head. What would I say? Hi, I'm your real mother, the one who couldn't keep a roof over your head? She doesn't even remember me. She was only 4 when they took her. Alexander wanted to offer comfort, but knew platitudes would ring hollow. Instead, he asked, what was she like? As a baby? Serena's expression softened, a genuine smile breaking through her exhaustion. Stubborn. Fearless. She walked at 9 months and never stopped moving after that. She had this laugh that could light up a room. As Serena spoke about her daughter, Alexander saw a different woman emerging, not the hardened survivor or efficient crisis manager, but a mother whose love had never diminished despite years of separation. Victor knows where she is, doesn't he? Alexander realized. That's part of his leverage over you. Serena nodded slowly. He claims to keep tabs on her. Says it's for my benefit. So I know she's safe. But really, it's just another way to control me. In that moment, watching the sunrise paint Serena's face with golden light, Alexander made a decision. Victor Erickson had used his power to destroy this woman's life, to separate her from her child, to keep her under his thumb. It was time someone used power to fight back. What if we found a way to break his hold over you? Alexander asked carefully. Legally. Permanently. Serena turned to him, wariness battling with a flicker of something that looked dangerously like hope. What are you suggesting? I don't know yet, Alexander admitted. But Victor Erickson didn't build his empire without creating enemies and vulnerabilities along the way. No one is untouchable. You don't understand what you're up against, Serena warned. Victor doesn't play by corporate rules. Alexander met her gaze steadily. Neither will I. Not anymore. The determination in his voice must have convinced her because Serena didn't immediately reject the idea. Instead, she asked, why would you risk everything? Your reputation, your business, possibly even your safety. For this? For me? It was a question Alexander had been asking himself for weeks. The answer had been gradually taking shape in his mind, becoming clearer with each day he spent at the sanctuary, each moment in Serena's presence. Because that night in the rain showed me what really matters, he said simply. And it isn't anything I have in my other life. As the sun climbed higher, casting long shadows across the rooftop, Serena made her own decision. She reached out and took Alexander's hand, her calloused palm against his smoother one, a bridge between their worlds. If we do this, she said carefully, we do it my way. No charging in with lawyers and money, thinking you can buy a solution. We need to be smarter than that. Alexander nodded, understanding that this was about more than finding Lily or defeating Victor. It was about restoring justice to a woman who had been fighting alone for too long. Together, then, he said. Together. Serena agreed, her voice stronger than it had been in years. As they sat side by side watching the city awaken, neither could have predicted the storm that was coming. A collision of worlds that would test them both to their limits and ultimately reveal that the most powerful force wasn't wealth or street smarts, but the unyielding courage to fight for what truly matters. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us. Forward together, despite the challenges that would inevitably come, for Maya, who had spent years defining herself by her work, by the walls she had built around her heart after losing her parents, this was perhaps the greatest act of courage yet. Believing that sometimes, against all odds, different worlds could collide in the most beautiful ways. That sometimes, a fire that threatened to destroy could instead become the catalyst for rebuilding something stronger, more meaningful, more true. And as Nathaniel's fingers intertwined with hers, Maya knew with absolute certainty that some risks, like running into burning buildings or opening your heart when all logic warned against it, were worth taking. Because sometimes, on the other side of fear, lay not just survival but a life transformed by the courage to reach for something more. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.